So everyone, we have Sylvia here, who is a mom, an entrepreneur, a speaker, and an amazing person. And what I want to share about Sylvia is that she has a lot of experience with dealing with unexpected things and within the family. So her son has a rare form of dwarfism, and we're going to get into Sylvia's story and in depth and her learnings of how do you deal with the unexpected, with the shock, or where something doesn't go as you hope, and turning it around to something that empowers you. I'd love her and her son have a talk out there that is something about making your differences help make a difference in the world. So super glad to have you here, Sylvia, and we're excited to get started.
So happy to be here with you.
So Sylvia has spent the last 2 decades learning how life presents us with unexpected twists and turns that can shake us to our core, stop us in our tracks, and provide a catalyst for exciting change. Her professional world took a leap from the predictable and defined realm of private banking in New York City to one of a few answers and no blueprint. With her son, 21-year-old Brandon, was diagnosed with a rare form of dwarfism. The experiences navigating a world not built for somebody like him prompted them to seek out ways to neither be confined nor defined by their limitations, perceived or otherwise. This has led to an entrepreneurial career path for both mother and son that has impacted millions of lives.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So Sylvia, I know today we're going to talk about adversity and a lot about parenting as well. And in your story, which we're going to get into in a second, there's a lot of crazy adversity out of nowhere. And how do we navigate through that? And we're also going to talk about things like fear, which we've talked about a lot recently, of how do we turn fear to something to our advantage as well. So welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here and share the journey.
Awesome. So I'd love to dig into a bit of the story and the backstory, which kind of leads up to this moment of adversity and the change of everything.
Absolutely.
If you don't mind.
Yeah. So I went to university. I went to New York University. I was a finance major, and I just took a leap into the corporate world in financial services and knew that, I had to work really hard to climb up the corporate ladder. And I continued that journey after I got married, ended up having 2 children, but life threw in an unexpected surprise when at the age of 2, my son was diagnosed with a rare form of dwarfism called metatropic dysplasia. So rare that there are less than 85 medically documented cases. And when you get a diagnosis that seems to just come out of nowhere, it was a genetic mutation. My husband and I didn't really spend much time being stuck in the why did this happen, or grieving what life would be like. We very quickly decided that our focus is going to be to enable Brandon to live the best life possible. But I also knew in my heart that I had to step away from the corporate world and really focus on navigating this unknown journey, because the diagnosis came with no blueprint and no playbook, and at the time, no social media to offer the support that I so desperately needed. So I found myself in a place where I truly just needed to create my own path in dealing with this. And so, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's just a question on that. So if the resources and people available to support you going through this being so rare, were there any outlets that you could reach out to? Any kind of previous knowledge on this and support groups or anything like that?
Unfortunately, at the time, there wasn't. Now is a totally different story. But what's interesting is the only thing that was given to me by the medical professionals was, you know what, you may want to look it up in some medical journals, but right. It was such an outdated description, these black and white photos of these severe deformities, and nothing that gave us any sort of hope that our son would be creating his own amazing future.
Yep.
But what I say now to parents is reach out on social media. There are so many amazing groups out there. And it's very easy to create your own tribe in the midst of adversity and in the midst of these sort of surprise diagnoses. So it's terrific that we now have the technology that unites us and provides us with all sorts of resources, because I really think that makes a huge difference in not feeling alone and isolated.
Absolutely.
Sylvia, I have a question. So with the support, I know that sometimes families, like your close family, like your parents or sisters or whatever, sometimes they don't give the support that you're actually needing, and you get better support from strangers at times. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to what could somebody in the position of being your family or that is not directly affected but wants to support you, what is the support that somebody that is receiving a shocking diagnosis needs? What should we do to support
Good
people that are going
question.
through that?
I love that question. Just walk alongside them in their journey and, continuously say, I am here for you. I can, be here as a sounding board. I'm happy to help you research. Just, let me know if you just want to talk, because like at first our family just didn't get it. They were questioning, well, how could this happen? Because it doesn't run in the family. And I could tell they were sort of looking at it through a lens of fear. And rightfully so, right? Because previously they were just used to, children being born and being healthy and just navigating, through a normal childhood. But what happened in our case was that they discovered a reality show called Little People, Big World. And they absolutely leaned into that, saying, oh my goodness, this is an incredible family. They may have dwarfism, but look at the adventurous life that they are living. So, a lot of times you're going to have extended family that just cannot relate to what you are going through. And I think it's important for us to understand that the support that you need may not come from that family, but it may come from your chosen family and the tribe that you build. But over time, I feel like they will come around and better understand. Just know that a lot of people have no idea how to react, and they just may be looking through things through a lens of fear rather than being curious in learning more about the condition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was it hard for you to get to the point where you knew how to ask for support, or was there a learning about that?
It really was, because truthfully, all I could think of, as my husband and I decided we're going to create the best life possible for Brandon, all I could think of is, I don't want people to label him. I don't want people to perceive him as less than. I don't want him to ever feel defined or confined by his condition. So truthfully, I wasn't even comfortable talking about it. And I didn't even know how to tell people about it. And, it took years for me to realize that Brandon was comfortable with it. So why shouldn't I be? And he didn't let it define him. So I shouldn't, place that burden on other people. And as years went on, I became a lot more comfortable. The other thing is that we found a group called Little People of America, which is a global group of individuals who come from all walks of life, who have hundreds of different types of dwarfism. And so we started going to their annual conferences. And
Right.
when you enter space when you realize you are not the only one, and for me as a mom, meeting people that were many steps ahead of us, it just gave me the comfort of knowing, okay, we're going to get through this. Mm-hmm. So it's just, realizing that you may not have all the answers, but you can certainly discover spaces that are welcoming for people to come together and learn more.
So I'm trying to figure out kind of a rough timeline without going into too much detail of from what was first going on and what was your kind of initial period of shock or fear or panic to a place where you found something that empowered you. There was not much knowledge out there or not much information, but you talked about finding the tribe. So was this over a long period of time, or was there other things that gave you or put you into a more kind of empowered mindset about this is going to be an amazing thing?
It really ebbed and flowed, to be
Right.
totally transparent with you, because as a parent, you have this child and you think you are responsible to protect them, right? And that they are not going to suffer, they're not going to have pain, because you're going to be that parent that creates this world that they'll be able to thrive in. And at the end of the day, you realize that you cannot rescue your children from everything that goes on in the world. And so for me, a difficult period was when Brandon was 11 years old and he had been diagnosed with depression. And again, I came from, I don't necessarily want to share this with people that are closest to me, because I don't want them to look at him
Yeah.
as, oh, that's Brandon, the depressed kid.
Right.
So I spent a lot of years just, navigating through that with my husband. And it wasn't until years later, when Brandon became a professional speaker and started sharing his story, that it just came out organically.
Right.
And I feel like it was his story to tell. It wasn't my story to share, because ultimately our kids are on their own journey in life. We are there to support them and walk alongside them. We are not there to always lead the path, because they're not following us. They're creating their own journey. So I feel like, if we have children who are able to navigate through adversity, who are not always relying on us to swoop them up from the pain and suffering, then they are able to find their authentic voice and eventually learn to stand in their own truth.
Yeah, and that's a powerful, beautiful message. And I think it's so tough for all parents. I totally agree with you. The last few years of kind of setting my own direction, claiming who I am is one of the most incredible things. So yeah, for Brandon to do that as well, and almost craft his incredible journey that he's on now, and using this adversity as his launch pad to be able to do that. I mean, it's like you say, it's a roller coaster up and down. It's crazy, but it's so inspiring when we see him now with the book you have there, 10 Feet Tall. And he's on Clubhouse all the time right now. He's a leader. It's incredible. And many people, he's incredibly inspiring to other people.
It's been a process to get to that point, because, as you know, our kids go through a period, and we remember going through that period also, especially, in the middle school years and then the high school years. You didn't really want to feel different. You wanted to fit in. You wanted to be accepted. You wanted to feel like you were being seen and heard. But at the same time, I think that there are, so many of our youth who don't appreciate people who are different than them. And at the end of the day, we're all different from one another, because there's no one else like us. So I think it's a question of really empowering our kids to embrace their uniqueness, instead of buying into what society had put forth in competing, for top grades and top accolades in sports. If you want to encourage your child to do that, that's fine, but also encourage them to embrace what makes them unique. And as Brandon says, what makes you the youest you.
Yeah.
That is something that I feel like our education system hasn't really honed in on. And for him, it took a lot of darkness to reach the point where he discovered that his uniqueness was a superpower. And I'm truly convinced that as human beings, many times our purpose finds us. And the way it finds us is that life throws us all these curveballs and these twists and turns. And many of them cause incredible pain, suffering, and darkness that we each need to walk through in our own way. And that's when we discover who we truly are and what we're made of. And it starts almost like breaking us open. And through those cracks, that's where our light shines. If you walk through life not having a sense of adversity or, any boulders that you have to overcome, then there's a part of you that hasn't yet been excavated. I hope that makes sense, but that is, a conclusion that I have come to know over the last few years as I jumped into the world of personal development.
I love what you just said. And I think that a lot of people do have adversity, but they don't get to the point where, like Brandon, he was able to share the fears or what he was going through. And you said yourself that you didn't share about the depression for a long time. And I think that it might be a gem to pull out that when people share what they're afraid of and what is their thing that they're going through, the boulder or whatever, that it ends up empowering them rather than weakening them, which is why we don't share. We think if we share, people are going to judge us or this or that. And it ends up doing the opposite, I find. And in my family's life, we had some traumatic events happen too, and we just kept it quiet. And it wasn't until we were able to say this happened and this happened that any of us could move forward and actually, help ourselves and help others. And so I think that it's something to note, that to encourage people to share their fear or share what's happening, and instead of disempowering yourself, it actually empowers you to.
Such a powerful point. And the bottom line is that sometimes when you are walking through that experience, you are not going to be able to find the strength to share. And that's okay. You just have to get through it instead of running away from it or trying to escape from it, or years later trying to distract yourself to the point where you don't let yourself feel those painful feelings. So sometimes sharing, could be many years later, and that's okay, because as humans, we all have our own process. But I agree with you. And I especially think that past generations were brought up to kind of keep it hush hush when there was anything negative going on in the family.
Yeah.
They were not comfortable at sharing that they needed help or they were going through some rough times. It wasn't a sign of strength. And yet now I feel like there is so much dialogue about ending the stigma and standing in your power and speaking your truth. I am hoping that those are the messages that our youth embraces, and that they are so comfortable in being uncomfortable and asking for the help that they need.
So how do you share with us, how do you turn this fear and adversity into power?
I think one way to do it is to take a step back and realize that everything you have gone through up until today has empowered you to get stronger and to be more resilient and to develop grit. Because let's face it, we've all been through hard stuff, especially this past year with the pandemic. I mean, we've all walked through some really difficult times. So just taking a step back and celebrating the fact that you have done hard things and you've been able to overcome them, I think that develops a sense of strength within you. The other thing is just realizing that when you have the emotion of fear, it usually comes from looking into the future and not knowing what the outcome will be. But at the end of the day, none of us know what the outcome will be. We don't need to have a diagnosis or a medical condition to face a sense of uncertainty and unknown. The fact of the matter is that's the constant in life. So if we sort of accept that and lean into that and realize that there's so much that we cannot control, but we can control how we react to all of that unknown, then we could replace the fear and anxiety with a sense of curiosity and excitement. Because the unknown of our future will continue to be there. But why not just say, you know what, I'm curious about it and I can't wait to see what the future brings. And I think, just that little mindset rewiring does wonders. And just journaling about it, writing a little bit about it, contemplating, sitting in your silence and meditating about it. It really helps.
Those are incredible bits of advice, and you just dropped so many in 2 or 3 sentences. That was incredible. I know journaling has helped a lot for me. in fact, a couple of days ago, we were talking about this very thing as well, about fear just kind of being this, it's just a feeling at the end of the day that happens inside us, kind of brain chemical feelings and emotions inside us. And we are the ones that have labeled it as something scary and paralyzing through all the stories. So it's really interesting to see how we can turn that around. But I do want to go back as well, because we've talked about this maybe the first time we spoke, Sylvia, about how can we help this kind of in the education system? How can we help this because we talk about tribe and environments, and the most craziest of all for our kids, of course, is when you're going into a class of strangers, other kids, and no one really knows what the hell's going on. And you're naturally, your environment kind of guides what you do and molds who you are, unless you can choose your own path, right? So how does someone be vulnerable, like as a kid, and say, like, this is what I'm worried about? Is it, should we be speaking to our teacher? Or should the whole class as a whole be better at listening to each other, understanding everyone has their own opinion, and we're not meant to be convincing each other to agree with us, just to listen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it starts with one child at a time. And, we can create an environment in our household where we truly begin to see our child for who they are and not the vision of who we want them to be.
Right.
And I'll give you an example of that. I remember going to Brandon's kindergarten orientation and having the administration tell us to always, strive to get your child on the gifted track, so that when it comes to middle school, they'll be able to take honors classes, right, and then advanced placement classes, which are basically college equivalents, here in the United States. And in kindergarten, I mean, and, raising a child like Brandon, I sort of let go of the pressure to conform to that way of thinking, because my heart said, no, Sylvia, you have to focus on enabling him to get an equitable experience, which means I literally had to start looking at things through his eyes and creating tools, whether they be tangible or intangible, for him to be able to experience things just like his peers were experiencing them, but they were towering over him.
Right.
So as parents, I think we have a choice. We don't need to buy into what society has been feeding us in terms of the definition of success. We can create our own success and help our kids navigate through their own unique journeys. And you know what? If they don't love to read, that's okay. Find an activity to do together, and I guarantee if they get excited about it, they're going to want to read about it. Yep. So, you can create a love and a thirst for learning despite conforming to the standard education system. And believe me, I am not anti-education, but what I am is someone who doesn't buy into, confining your child to a model that has worked all these years and assuming that that's the model that is best for them.
Yep.
So I feel like we can instill a curiosity in our kids. We can instill a sense of self-worth by really focusing on discovering things with them. If they go through a period where they're into dinosaurs or rocks, leap into that and find ways to, excavate and explore those things together. Do some common things that light them up, and then they become comfortable in sharing feelings with you, and even the most uncomfortable feelings.
I agree. Sylvia, I for a while I thought, I want to change the education system, and I thought I'm going to tell the teachers this is the books they should read and stuff like that. And I actually gave up on the idea, and this is what I decided. I'm going to create the environment in my home that I want my child to learn about emotional intelligence, even about finances and entrepreneurialism. And I'm going to leave the school as kind of like another example of the world, and they'll deal with whatever happens in the school, and then they'll come back, and then here we can talk about how do you deal with the emotional intelligence with the thing that happens at school. And I just kind of gave up on trying to change the school system and just figured out I can just give him the skills and he'll go practice at school, you know?
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I think also it's about kind of turning things on their head. And what I mean by that, like, you know, when our kids were toddlers and they would literally fall every other step, like we didn't freak out. We kind of celebrated like, oh, you know, you're okay. And
Yeah.
like they figured out how to quickly get back up. And those are the things that we need to continue as they get older. Like celebrate their falls and their failures, because those are opportunities for them to learn and grow. I love a recent interview that I heard with Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx. She shared that her dad at the dinner table would not ask them, what did you learn today? But he would say, what did you fail at today?
Yeah.
Isn't that a brilliant way to teach our kids that it's not just about memorizing facts and getting straight A's, but it's about taking risk and stretching yourself and challenging yourself to the point where you're going to celebrate your failures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, incredibly powerful. Yeah, I do the same with Callie. In fact, a few days ago, I remember her saying to me that, and I find that the most fulfilling for me is when you've been working with your kid on something like Nina said, emotional intelligence, and you're slowly kind of feeding in some of the wisdom, you know, that we read in the books, and you think your kid isn't listening. Like I remember when Callie was 3 or 4 even, and just talking to her about these kind of things about failing. There's no failures unless you give up. Like you can learn from all of them, and you feed your kids these things, and you don't think they're listening. And then a year later, they'll suddenly just pop out with something random that you taught them a year before, and you know it went deep. And it's so beautiful when that happens. I've seen that many times in Cal.
It's so true.
The other day we were sledding down the hill. There's snow here, and she was telling her mum, actually, her mum's awesome, and her mum didn't want to go on that sled, and Callie was like, but I was taught that you have to try something new every day, or something that scares you every day. I was over in the distance. I'm like, yes, I heard it.
And that's the interesting thing. You know, you'll see, like, as your kids get older, and especially, you know, during those teenage years where they are naturally prone to kind of pushing away from you and kind of, you know, going in the opposite direction. At the end of the day, like, you may think that they're not listening to your words, but they are watching.
They are.
No matter how old they are watching. And I think that's the other part of the equation, Nina. Also, us as parents showing up at our fullest potential, right? Embracing ourselves and talking about the human side of who we are, and not always trying to show this perfected image that we've got it all figured out. I think it's okay for us to show our vulnerability and say, you know what? I'm feeling sad today. I'm feeling frustrated. I don't have answers for this. I don't have it figured out. Let's try to brainstorm together. I just think that the more our children could see us in our true light with the imperfections and everything, the more that they'll be able to embrace those things about themselves and not really try to curate this unrealistic image of who they should be. You know, in the personal development space, I feel like the more work we do on ourselves, the more people we meet in our journey who are doing the same. And it really saddens me to see so many people in their 40s and 50s, you know, talk about how they've spent so many of their adult years living into the expectations of their parents. And this was after they became full-fledged adults, but they felt like, you know what, my parents invested all this money and time into giving me these opportunities, and how can I bear to tell them that this isn't the path that I want to be on? And it's not until, you know, much later in their years that they're able to sort of shift and go in another direction. But I feel like if we show our kids that, you know, we're constantly growing and we're being challenged and we're exploring our, you know, passions that continue to evolve, then it gives them permission to do the same.
Absolutely. Because it feels like most of us go through the same scenario where we follow a path that we were for some people that we were told to do, that we should do, that we should be a doctor, or we should be this path in certain cultures as well. And we follow, like for me, even following the path of, I have to get married, I have to have the family, and then the kids and family, and then the house, and then upgrade your house, and then the yard, and then everything will be happily ever after, right? So we are told to, or we're raised, and movies and media and everything feeds us these paths, and then we follow them, and then we all get to this place where we're like, okay, that didn't work. I gotta wake up. I gotta change. I've got to then, and then you realize kind of, I don't even know who I am, and you've got to figure that out. So I'm always curious, how can that happen a lot sooner? How can we start to kind of dig into and discover our identities when we're teenagers or even younger? Like how can we get clarity on our purpose and our meaning, even though it's going to change over the years? Like when we're so young, can we do that at such an early age, rather than having to go through this like path that we were told to go through and then find out it didn't work for us?
I think this pandemic, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That question, like, what were the questions that you learned to ask that helped Brandon figure this stuff out for himself?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it goes to your question, right, Dave? Like, how can we go sooner?
It does. It's amazing, actually, because for Brandon, it's almost like this discovering who you really are was forced at a much, much younger age because of the scenario. So yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like the pandemic has kind of given us space to really take a step back and look at our lives through a different lens, and realize that everything that we had been led to believe was external, right? Like we were always chasing external milestones, or even if we had our own personal goals, those were the goals that would enable us to perhaps make more money, to buy the upgraded house, or to travel the world, or, it was always like chasing one external thing after another.
Yeah.
And yet I feel like it has forced us to dig deep within us, because we haven't been able to enjoy those external things. And as a result, we have learned that those things no longer define us, and they don't bring us the joy we thought they would bring, and that our happiness is really more of a state of being than a state of doing.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
When you ask me what questions did I ask Brandon, to be honest with you, it was everything that he has gone through that has led him to where he is. What God has not given him in physical stature, he has given him in the ability to realize that his internal growth is limitless, although his physical growth is severely limited. So again, I think it's just really understanding that we cannot mold our kids into who we want them to be. But for example, let's say they go to school and they leave their homework at home. And if, they have the opportunity to call you an hour later when they open up their backpack and realize their homework isn't there, you have the ability to react to that in two different ways, right? You could drop everything and run to their room to get their homework off their desk and drop it off at school. Or you could say, honey, I'm so sorry that happened to you. You're going to have to deal with the consequences. So I feel like the more we enable our kids to understand those lessons from, when life doesn't go your way, whether it be a tiny little thing like forgetting your homework or dealing with some significant family issues, those are the opportunities for us to help them navigate and understand that they can develop some unbelievable skills by going through that. And at the end of the day, I think that is what created the opportunities for Brandon to find his voice. So if I could say anything, I would say help your kids discover the world of drama or dance or acting, or the creative outlets, writing, journaling, the creative outlets that enable them to literally put forth their voice in artistic ways. Because Brandon started acting at the age of 8. And to me, that was something that enabled him to really understand what it was like to be part of a team, because unfortunately he couldn't participate in sports like his peers were able to do, just because his bones were just not growing the way that, you know, normal bones grow. So physically he couldn't do it. But the world of drama opened up a whole new world for him, because when you are on stage in a production, you realize that you're not doing something in a vacuum, but you're part of a bigger team, and you need to learn to work together. So I am a firm believer in the arts, to really help put forth the creative juices that our kids have, and to enable them to find a sense of self that, you know, math and science may not necessarily bring out.
I can't agree more. I was going to talk about Nina's dance school, but I'm also thinking of, I go to hip hop classes these days whenever I can.
Really? I had no idea about you.
I know. I'm the old guy at the back with all the teenagers in the front, and there's like 30 of them back before the pandemic. And it was amazing to me, because in the world now of, you know, understanding a bit more emotional intelligence and the energy of a room and things like this, then I can see what you're talking about. Like, I can see all these teenagers, they're in this hip hop class and everyone's wearing something different. Everyone's wearing exactly what they want to wear. Baggy clothes over here and tight clothes over here. And it's whatever they want, whatever they choose for a start, what they're going to wear and what they're going to look like. And they get to develop, like, looking at themselves in the mirror and actually being able to do that, because it's not the easiest thing. I struggle. Like, I don't want to look at myself in the mirror, and then end up smiling all the time. Like, Eric's the teacher at the front talking about, you got to have the attitude in this song. You got to own the song. I'm like, I can't do it. I keep smiling. And I see all of these kids developing their characters, their personalities, like their actual own identity, but then building another, like, performance identity on top of that through their dancing, which is incredible. And they just look so empowered. And I can imagine some of these kids are in school and feeling super, super shy, and then they come to their hip hop class, and that's their moment to just be exactly who they want to be and create whatever they want to create. And it's really, really cool to see.
And I think that's actually also another way to deal with the fear, you know, creating these alter egos or using the archetypes of life. I just learned that recently in a workshop that, you know, if I don't have the strength to get in front of the camera, well, maybe Warrior Nina does. And what's her name and what is she like and what's that personality? And just kind of embody that for a moment. But then at another time, I don't need Warrior Nina if I'm going to, you know, when I think about coaching clients on online dating, and I think you need to be funnier, I think about the magician, you know, and what would the magician say, or what would the comedian say, and just use the archetypes to put myself in a different mindset, you know, different thoughts, different personality qualities come with those archetypes. There's so many. It's actually a whole new world. Have you tried that, Sylvia, with, you know, your clients that you coach, or with people when you're inspiring them? Is that something that you do as a tool to tell them about archetypes?
Yeah, and I do that through storytelling, and just, you know, give them like real life lived experiences, because I feel like storytelling is truthfully magical. And when we talk about education, I wish that was a requirement in our school system, because when we share our stories, people are able to see a part of themselves in our story, and it gives them permission to share their own story. And it's such a beautiful thing. It's a sense of authenticity and vulnerability, and a way to connect on such a genuine level. And it makes us just lean into the humanity, with all of our uniqueness and all of our imperfections, and really stand in our truth, and realize when you stand in your truth, you are standing in your power, because I'm convinced you can't show up as who you truly are until you are able to step into your truth fully.